Welcome, Vice Mayor and council members. I call this I call this meeting of the Albany City Council for January 3rd, 2022 to order. Councilmember Gary, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Did you want to do a roll call first?
We can do it either way.
Okay, it's up to you.
Yeah, I prefer to go with the land.
The city of Albany recognized that we occupied the land originally protected by the Confederate villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The city of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribes, and together we will build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you, Councilmember Gary. City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gary?
Here.
Councilmember McQuay?
Here.
Councilmember Nason?
Here.
Vice Mayor Tiedemann?
Here.
Mayor Jordan?
Here. Thank you, City Clerk. Moving on now to City Manager report. City Manager, may the council have your report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and first of all, Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to see you back virtually. We had an incident today at Albany Target, a fire actually in the building, and wanted to share that information with the community. Unfortunately, our Albany Target store is closed until further notice due to the damage from that fire. Congratulations to our Albany CERT group who received a $25,000 grant from PG&E recently. This is a significant accomplishment and speaks to the organization and dedication of this group. For more information on how you can support the group and their focus and perseverance on getting Albany ready for any disaster that strikes, you can visit their website directly at albanysert.org. We are proud to share that the annual compliance report and audit specifically to the Transportation Commission was submitted on time. The number of findings on the overall analysis was reduced from 3 to 1 this year as further improvement in financial accounting and records. We're also working to produce the full CAFR for the council as required and as due by December 31st. We hope to have that analysis and CAFR to staff from the auditor by the end of January, and intend to present the information both to the Finance Committee and the council in February. We have a home buyer education workshop on January 22nd and 29th from 10 to 3. These are free workshops held for community members to talk about how to purchase homes, information and tips on closing costs, and overall ways to successfully secure a home. You can visit echofairhousing.org for more information, ECHO fairhousing.org. Our community survey on the long-term parklets is still ongoing. The well-received outdoor dining at many of our business restaurants in town. Please take an opportunity to complete this survey online. We're thrilled that we have over 900 responses thus far, and will really help provide and informed decisions on this. So you can go to our website to get the link, but I'll also read it. It's a little clunky, I'm sorry, but it's surveymonkey.com/long-term parklets community. Also a reminder that there are COVID tests available on Tuesdays at the community center, thanks to Curative. These are no longer walk up. So you would need to make an appointment to have a test done, but it is certainly accessible at that location. You can go to their website, cur.tv/Albany to make an appointment. And that completes my city manager report.
Thank you, City Manager. That is a stunning response rate, given the survey is not over yet. I will, with respect, offer the clarification, since there's now 2 transportation commissions, local and county, that the City Manager was referring to a compliance report that was filed with the Alameda County Transportation Commission. If anyone attending would like to ask a question about or comment on the City Manager's report, please press your raise hand button. You will have 1 minute. If you're on the phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Note this is for questions and comments on the City Manager's report only. If you have comments on matters not on the agenda, the time for those is next. In this and all comments and questions during the meeting, address the council, not other attendees, and respect each person that has spoken. The council wants everyone to feel comfortable speaking and not be intimidated by others' comments or reactions. I don't see any hands raised. City Clerk, do you see any hands raised?
No, I don't.
Okay, with that, we will move on to Good of the City. This is for attendees to provide the council comments, information, and questions on an item that is not on the agenda. Please raise your hands now, and again by phone, you push *9. By state law known as the Brown Act, the council cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda except under extraordinary circumstances. Rather, items may be raised for referral potentially to a future agenda or for staff comment. And I do not see any hands raised. With that, we will move right along to the next item, which is the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item? I'll follow the prior mayor's good practice, go around the room. Councilmember Nason, Councilmember McQuaid, Vice Mayor Tiedemann, Councilmember Gary. Is there anybody in attendance who would like to have an item pulled? Please raise your hand. Going once, going twice. We are moving right along. I do not see any hands raised. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Councilmember McQuaid.
I'll move approval of consent.
Thank you, Councilmember McQuaid. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Nason. We have a motion and a second to approve the recommendations as they exist on the consent calendar. City Clerk, would you please poll the council?
Councilmember McQuaid,
Yes.
Councilmember Nason,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tiedemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Gary,
Yes.
and Mayor Jordan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
With that, we will move on to the next item, which is 10-1. This regards potentially contracting with a survey firm to perform a racial equity and community satisfaction survey. May the council have a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is provided in follow-up to a few staff reports you've had on this subject to date, starting in September of 2021, when the council received a request from the Social and Economic Justice Commission for implementation specifically of a racial equity survey. At that time, the council directed staff to look further into the opportunity and also to combine it with a community satisfaction survey to gain an overall sense of community satisfaction across city departments and services, really to help inform decision-making and policy making going forward and to track over time. The council also provided direction to prepare a request for proposals for said services And staff also incorporated into the request for proposals the optional task of conducting voter polling services should those be deemed necessary and of interest to the council in advance of the next election in November 2022. The report before you this evening summarizes the response to the request for the proposals, basically the proposals we received. We received a total of 4 responses. The firms that submitted are listed in your staff report. Staff reviewed all the proposals received and based on the specific circumstances and need of City of Albany, particularly combined really across disciplines with the complexity of both the overall satisfaction survey, the racial equity component, as well as the potential for voter polling. The firm of Probolski was the most competitive in terms of the proposals received. And it is recommended that the council consider authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with such firm for the services included within the proposal. Again, the task of voter polling is optional at this point in time, pending further direction from the council. Walking through your staff report a bit further, one of the suggestions is that a subcommittee of the city council be comprised to review the draft survey questions and coordinate with staff and the consultant. This is similar to a process that we've used for a few years now with the voter polling, which has been in the past a subcommittee of the mayor and vice mayor. Also, because of the racial equity component, it's important to include the direct input from the Social and Economic Justice Commission, and as such, advised that that commission identify a subcommittee to, again, coordinate with staff and the consultant on the preparation of that work. Let's see, you've received a few questions regarding this agenda item. I've asked the consultant, Adam Probolski, to join us this evening to speak directly to the proposal and any questions the council may have. And then I am happy to follow up with any additional questions that the council may have, but would like to defer to Adam as really the preparer of this work, should the council have any questions directly for him.
Thank you, City Manager. I don't know if the intention was that Mr. Dr. Probolski would speak now, or we go ahead and have some council questions. Sounds like council questions, if I understood correctly. Okay. Do any council members have questions? I'm not seeing anybody. Yes, Councilmember Garrity.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I do have a few questions. So when the RFP was submitted, I see that there were only 4 that responded. I guess my question would be, what was the criteria and the process in getting the information out to prospective companies to be a part of the RFP?
Sure, that's a standard process that we have in place where we post it to our website and then we also send it out to firms that we are familiar with. Would it be all inclusive of every firm potentially under the sun with regard to this area of expertise? No, but it's a very standard process across multiple jurisdictions.
And so my next question is how, and this can go to Adam, how would your agency address the issues related to communication and diversity?
So we are, by nature, everything we do foundationally starts with making sure we're capturing the opinions of every corner, every quarter of every community we're working in. And that starts with our multilingual approach, making sure that we are, certainly in anything in the United States we do, has English and Spanish as an option, and we explore other needs. So for instance, Chinese or Vietnamese, depending on the community, Korean, et cetera. So that foundationally makes sure that we're starting in the place where everybody gets the chance to communicate the way they prefer to communicate. Similarly, we make sure that we communicate with people, kind of essentially meet them where they are. So we call people on landlines because some people still have them. We call people on their mobile phones because most people prefer to talk on the mobile. And then the vast majority of people have the opportunity to respond to us through a text message or an email link. If we do not see that we are getting the representation of all community members, we have other tools that we can use to make sure that we are matching based on age, gender, race, and geography, and other things depending on the community. And so that's our go-to point is language and mode. And as far as the communication and outreach, we are on the research side. So our job is to represent the voice of the community in our research. If there's some specific goal you have as far as outreach, we're happy to participate in that. But our job is to represent the community as a whole in every way. And as far as questions go, I want to make sure I'm being responsive, like on diversity and equity issues and inclusion issues. We have some typical work that we do in virtually every community we work in, and we work in hundreds of communities throughout the country to make sure that we're asking the right questions to get the true answers from the community based on their concerns and their satisfaction. On the satisfaction side, their concerns on city services, and then making sure that they believe or identify what they believe is coming from City Hall and being done at City Hall on DEI issues.
Thank you so much. I have one more question. So I know that we received email regarding the makeup of your company structure from CEO to employees. And when you speak about asking the right questions, and my research based on the information that was sent, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. So though we have a small percentage of Black Americans in Albany, how would you frame those questions in order to target them to get a response that we need to capture their perspective as a whole?
Sure. So, and I appreciate that comment and that question. I do want to point out that certainly I don't think we do have anybody on our currently that might look like you, Councilmember. We are a woman-owned and Latina-owned company, 100%, and we are majority minority staffed. And our work, just some examples, in places where they do have much larger Black and African-American populations, for instance, in our work recently in South Carolina and in Virginia, and certainly in other communities in California, where we have a mandate to make sure we are capturing the voice of African-American and Black residents. And we have some very specific questions that we ask on those fronts to make sure we're capturing their voice. The fact is that the questions we ask are not targeted based on race. They're targeted based on community to make sure that we are capturing the voice of everyone, and everyone ought to have an opinion about all these different issues. And surprisingly, some of them have opinions that not all of us would be okay with, but that's all right. We need to understand what everyone thinks and how to make sure everyone gets the chance to be included in those in their opinions, and how our job is to give you as the policymakers the information so you can take action upon it. One of the examples I provided to the city manager today was a community in South Carolina that is not doing by any standard as well as any of us would necessarily want when it comes to inclusion and equity. And they know it as a community, they know where they're at. and they know they have goals to get to a better place, a place where more people feel like the community is for them, and more people feel like City Hall is being inclusive in hiring. And so, we don't make necessarily a judgment. We tell you where things are at, and we give you a path to improving numbers.
And in your comment, you say something about that it's not based on racial components. And I think that's the goal in this racial equity, like reaching out to, African Americans, Latinas, and having that incentive to relate to them. So how do you relate to them, right? If you've never been in their shoes, how do you bring those questions out so they can understand, like, okay, yes, he can see Albany through my eyes, instead of, how are you going to get that information out? And what tools are you going to use to get that information out? I know you said there's questions that you guys have already laid out, but specifically for Albany, what would that look like?
Okay, so first, every community is different. So the fact that I might have a question that I've asked 100 times before is meaningless to me when we get started rolling up our sleeves working for the city of Albany. Our job is to make sure we understand everything about the community. And just so you know, I polled in Albany 100 times before. We have state agencies that we work for. We have local, broader regional agencies that we work for, and nonprofits that we work for. So we are engrossed in the community. We understand your community. Not as well by any means that your commissioners and you as council members and your staff know it. And so our first job is to, if we get the chance to, sit around the city manager's conference room table and get that big download. If it's on Zoom, that's fine too. And our job is to get the full download of what you all are thinking, how you relate to the community and how you think they relate to you, and what challenges you think there are, and how we're going to overcome them, how you're going to go overcome them, and the things that you want to accomplish. And we can test all those things in the context of a survey. So I'll give you an example. In Half Moon Bay, they have some real challenges with policing. And so they've asked us to come in and get a sense of where the community is when it comes to their sheriff's contract and what they want policing to look like in the future, and what changes need to be made. And so it's our job to do that discovery work within the people who have that much greater of understanding on the ground of what's happening, and give us that information so we can craft the questions that are highly relevant to everybody in the community.
I'll digress, Mayor, and if you want to open it up.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Gary. Vice Mayor, other council members, do you have any questions? Thank you. I would ask, and I know it's ongoing work, so you probably can be more or less revealing about it. Can you give examples of questions that go specifically to that, the issue you raised of performance of police department?
That's a good question. Sure. I mean, let me, did not have that in front of me, but
yeah, sure. I put you on the spot. So why don't
No. This is what we do for a living, right? So,
okay,
so
right.
it can't
if
be.
you need some time, I can go to public comment.
No.
Okay.
Let me get your questions, because I want to be able to focus on the public comments when they come up.
Sure.
So I'll give you a few examples, and you're right, it is ongoing work. So I'm not going to share my screen or anything, because nothing is set yet here.
Mm-hmm.
But we ask a question about, or we're going to ask a question about if police services, well, sheriff's deputies, let's say, are responsive to the concerns of the residents. If people trust the deputies, if they are friendly and approachable, if they are effective at proactively preventing crime, and if they address problems and concerns that concern me the most, right? So these are things that may be nuanced, but very specific to how some people might feel versus others. Do you trust law enforcement? So we get this kind of broader perspective of, is law enforcement trusted, and then is local law enforcement trusted? So you get a sense of maybe there's a difference there. We as researchers consistently look for differences in opinions based upon some of those factors, and then we do our discovery work to see, okay, what do we have to do to bring local law enforcement, or forgetting law enforcement, just coming into, let's say, services from City Hall or diversity at City Hall. How do we take ourselves from where we are now to a better place? And I could, talk more, talk about whether deputies, you feel like they protect you and your family, real specific things, get into their personal experience when it relates to law enforcement. And the same thing goes residents' personal experience when it comes to city services, or as it relates to, let's say, staffing at City Hall.
Thank you very much. I found that helpful. So with that, if there aren't any other questions, we will go to public comment. Each commenter will have 3 minutes. Should they want? Of course, you're welcome to use less, but you will have 3 minutes. I see one hand raised at the moment. So City Clerk, thank you very much.
Hi, this is Margie Marks. Thank you. One of the selling points for this research group was that it's a woman-owned business. So I'm very dismayed to see what appears to be a male sitting there, in a leadership position answering the questions for this company. Number two, I know you've already gotten some emails on this, but there appear to be no members of color, of African Americans that work for this company. A citizen sent 2 email questions today and did not get a response. And I'm assuming that means no, that there are no African American employees. I feel like in Albany, we need a group. I have, looking at the resume of this group, I have no doubt that they can follow up on the community satisfaction part of the survey. Great. I do question the racial equity part of it. It looks like they've had no experience in that. The other groups I looked at, the other 3 groups, didn't appear to have that either. So I would like the city to go further, to reach out further, to get someone. We're losing Black members in our community. And I, for one, and I don't want that to happen anymore. I want us to attract African Americans to be part of this community, to improve the diversiveness of the community. So I would like the council to look for another group because I don't think this group has the experience needed, or actually the other groups that applied either, for the racial equity part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marks. And for the next commenter, thank you, City Clerk. If you are speaking, you are still on mute.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I just would like to suggest that in reviewing the potential candidates for this type of research, that you just include the nature of all issues concerning your city. Diversity and inclusion is certainly one of them, and it is a priority issue. But more importantly, the goal is to unite all of you in moving forward to address all issues concerned within communications for the city to all residents. And this individual, I would suggest, may be qualified in many areas, but may also be a little bit away from the priority issue of inclusion with everyone. So I would second the previous caller's comments, but also ask that the extension be beyond your city to include firms of all diversity. namely Latino firms that are around your area within the sphere and scope of addressing further issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no other hands raised, we will bring it back to council for discussion. Any council members, the vice mayor, have comments, further questions, deliberation? Councilmember Gary.
Thank you. So in regards to outreach, and I know you touched on that a bit, but if you can just elaborate, what other methods were we using? You know, phone, I understand we're in a pandemic, and so definitely meeting people could be cumbersome, but I just want to hear your approach on outreach and how to get this information extracted from the community.
Sure. So in the practice of doing opinion research, which is what we're doing here, the standard in 20 years ago, right, was calling people at dinner time on their landline at home, right, or 30 years ago. That's how it was done. We have certainly evolved since then. Most of us prefer to respond to surveys online. And that's how most people will. We are, I think I want to be clear, we are not in the advocacy business, and we are not in the education business. So our job is to accurately reflect your community, make sure everyone in every demographic, every age group, every income group, every geography is represented truly in the research. And that's how we're going to do it, in a telephone, in an online environment. And if we see that we are not getting full participation from any one of those demographics or geographic areas, we will take those next steps. We will send a piece of mail. We will knock on doors. We will do point of contact research at places if we need to. And we have done that in certain places as necessary. I don't believe that will be necessary. You have a decent sized community with, the CDC, for instance, just to give you an example, oddly enough, is the agency that tracks cell phone usage. And they tell us that the majority of people, of course, are cell phone only or mostly. And they also tell us that virtually everyone in America has a phone, and that includes our homeless population. So we have a high level of confidence that we're going to reach every quarter, every community within your community. And if we see that that's not happening based on census data or input from others, then we're going to go through those other means to collect the data. But our job is to make sure we're representing the community, and we'll make sure that's the case.
All right, thank you so much, Adam. I just have one thing, just as the public spoke, I would have liked to see firms that were local, that were Latina owned, African-American owned, to be as part of the contender. And I know, we can't go out and say, oh, we only want all Black. I understand that. But I think there should have been, or could be, more research on soliciting to those firms just to see what they bring to the table as well. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gary. Any other council member or vice mayor? Vice Mayor Tiedemann.
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, first of all, Adam, thank you for the responses to these. It's been quite thorough. That, like Councilmember Gary said, it would be, we are somewhat hobbled in what we can do. We can't put requirements around ethnicity or anything in our RFPs. And I don't think we can reject projects based on their makeup. That leaves us in a very difficult legal position. I think the idea of making sure that we are, getting our RFPs and everything out to as many people as possible and casting a wide enough net so that we can get all of the types of businesses we want in there is a good one, and maybe one for discussion of just making sure our RFP process is good. I'm not saying it isn't. I have confidence in our city staff, but it's always worth looking to make sure we're improving. So I'm not saying it's not an important thing to do. So I think it may be that this is a conversation we should have more generally of how can we make sure that we're doing that in every case where we do this, instead of, looking at this one and saying, well, we need to keep going with the RFP process and do it over again until we get something that we like a little bit more. I think Adam and the proposal has shown that it's that this can give us the information we need, and that we can really make use of it. And if we want to ensure that we're doing better in the future, then we should definitely take proactive steps to do that.
Mayor Jordan, if I might just jump in and reiterate what you heard from Councilmember Gary and Vice Mayor Tiedemann, that they are correct. We are prohibited from giving any sort of preferential treatment based off on contracts based off of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or natural origin. So I just wanted to reiterate that for members of the public and confirm what you have heard from the two council members.
Thank you, City Attorney. Councilmember McQuaid or Nason, do you have any thoughts on this? Councilmember McQuaid.
Thank you. I think the thing that in listening to your comments this evening, if I can say Adam and not totally butcher your last name,
Please.
The one thing that I find very hopeful, I guess, is the idea that if we're not reaching everyone in our community, that you take very specific and concrete steps to reach out to people that maybe for whatever reason aren't participating. To me, that's really important. It's not just we put out the survey and 3 people answered and we're done, but it's a really proactive reaching out to those people who may not respond on the first try and that need a little extra care. And I like that approach. I think that will serve us well. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you, Councilmember McQuaid. Councilmember Nason.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple of items. One is UC Village. If I'm understanding the census correctly, UC Village has experienced a doubling of its Black population and a halving of its Asian population between the censuses. And it will be interesting if we can learn more about that. But thinking about it made me realize, well, and this is always kind of a problem with user surveys, and I'm most involved in it in recreational user surveys, but you survey the people who are using a trail or something, and you don't necessarily hear about the situation of people who are not using the trail, who have stopped using it or never went to it because of its reputation or something like that. And I think this is good as far as it goes, but I would love to see us do a little bit more with outreach to people who may not be utilizing what Albany has to offer. And I think of, for example, we've heard apart from UC Village, which has changed so much, I'm curious about the discrepancy between our public high school enrollment in Albany and the enrollment at St. Mary's, that Albany has something like a 5% African-American population, while St. Mary's has something like a 20% African-American population. It would be interesting to learn about why that is and whether there are issues that we should address. A very serious one came up in the context of our police review commission that we're working on, the notion that we talked about how at one time the Albany Police Department had a very bad reputation in the larger African-American community of surrounding cities. And and I'm talking here about the 1960s, but some people were saying, well, that's still true. The Albany Police Department has a bad reputation. And I really would like to know if that is in fact true. And if so, what it's based on. So I'm supportive of this as far as it goes. And although I share some of the concerns others have expressed, I'm happy with moving forward, but I hope that at some point we might look at some of these, the issues, particularly of people who are not here in Albany, or not coming through Albany, are not seeking housing in Albany, are not seeking education in Albany. Are there things that are of concern to people? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nason. And that sounds like it would be potentially an extension of the scope of work, since the scope was.
I'm not suggesting we do that. We already extended the scope from a community satisfaction survey to bring in the racial equity element. This would be a whole additional approach, and I'm just kind of trying to mark it for future consideration that a broader, a more comprehensive approach might be called for at some point in the future.
Yes, I'm intrigued because Albany is but one city in a fabric of cities. So it would be a different survey to survey outside of Albany regarding impressions on Albany. But I think that's potentially quite useful means to pursue in terms of providing insight to the city about itself. But I hear what you're saying. You're not suggesting extending this scope of work, but it's something that we should keep in mind.
Yeah.
Are there any other? I think we've gone around all the way. Yes, Councilmember Gary.
I just have one quick question. As far as the task force, if someone could bring clarity on their role if we decide to go with this firm, because I just want to make sure that the equity component is being, taken care of. So what will be their role? Is it 2 or 1? How are they going to be the driving force? I just need clarity on what that would look like.
Yes, on my part, I don't know if it's the task force or the Social and Economic Justice Commission. I believe I saw a Social and Economic Justice Commission in that. I'm sorry, what? Councilmember Gary.
Sorry, that's what I was referring to, the Social Economic Justice Commission, not the police task force. 2 different.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know, city staff, city manager, if you have thoughts in that regard. I think there was some thoughts in the proposal or other material.
Sure. Yeah, it would be a collaborative process with the consultants and staff. So there would conceivably, depending on council action, be a subcommittee of the city council, 2 members, to work with staff and the consultants on the preparation of the overall survey and questions and concerns to be addressed in the questions. As part of that, it goes across departments. So there would be some engagement with each department as well in terms of the services and programs provided by the city. Specifically for the role of SEJC, it would be a subcommittee of that group to work directly with the consultants and staff regarding the racial equity component of the survey.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate the firm submitting a proposal. I want to note that we received, one of the comments we received had to do with the grade of the firm by 538, which was an interesting resource I didn't know about. This firm, while it received a BC, it was the highest grade of the 4 firms that responded. Another firm had a CD and the other 2 firms didn't have a grade. So in that regard, it seems, by that metric at least, which is what it is, seems like we're heading in the right direction. Staff kindly provided the proposal, and I'm concerned about starting a process that has some question of trust right at the start. That's not a great place to start from, and I think we're hearing some of that. I'm inclined to ask if the firm would provide a narrative and examples. And I know examples were posted today, I believe. I think it was today, late today. So members of the community haven't necessarily had a chance to look at it. But if the firm can provide a narrative around its DEI work, somewhat similar to the narrative that is provided around its community satisfaction work, I think that might help the community see the work that the firm has done, judge that work for better or worse. For the firm's own interest, I think that would be a marketing product that would be quite useful for you to have. I may be mistaken, but I didn't see that really featured forward in the proposal. And just in terms of the history of how we arrived at this moment, we arrived here through an interest in surveying around DEI, not community satisfaction. Community satisfaction is something that came up later as something we would also like to do. But this is really about DEI. And so I have trepidation about proceeding at this point, again, because this subject is a subject that requires setting out with trust. And I'm not sure that we have that fully right now. It's not a criticism of the firm. Just I'm a little concerned about acting precipitously at this point. So I don't know if any other council members or vice mayor have any reaction to that thought of, well, first, I guess I should ask Adam, since people are calling you Adam, would you be open to developing and providing something like that? Because I think there's been a lot of late breaking information that's useful, but doesn't give the community time to digest it.
We're on Team Albany, so if there's something we can provide to you that would be helpful, we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. I don't know. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe the council hold off approving or not approving at this point, waiting for sort of further narrative and information to come forward and for the community to have a chance to look at that information.
Mayor, if I might, my only caution is I don't know how different it looks than what we've already provided. A very clear picture of communities of majority color where we've worked on these issues, and communities in California all throughout where we've worked on these issues that have smaller minority populations. So I don't know if it's going to look very different than what I've provided to staff so far and what's in our proposal. Background on our firm and on the work we've done. The questions we've got from the community, things like that. I think most of that was in our proposal and definitely kind of fine-tuned by what I've provided for staff already.
Well, it's maybe to give an example, I think the report that you provided in response to questions around the firm's DEI practice regarding the project for Edgewater, Colorado, if I have the name right.
Sure.
That seemed to be maybe a little bit more on point than when I looked through, and I can't say that I looked through all 800 pages or whatever of the 4 examples that were provided in the proposal. I think I made it through all the graphs and charts of one of them. So the Edgewater example seemed a little more on point with some of its questions. So, my interest, if it's possible, is if you have examples that head further in that direction, that might be helpful to the community. And with that, I've spoken a lot. Councilmember McQuaid.
Yes, thank you. Mayor, I do hear what you're saying, and I've heard what all the community members have said. It does seem to me that with the subcommittee of the council and the subcommittee of the SEJC that we are actually taking a larger role perhaps than we realize in driving the questions or driving this process. And with that in mind, that we are actually the ones you're basically setting up the questions. I think that will give us what we need rather than postponing this process for another 2 weeks or a month or whatever. I'm not really sure there's a benefit to that. And I think that using the these two subcommittees, and I'm sure Mala will weigh in at some point as to how they coordinate or don't coordinate. I think that will serve us well.
Thank you, Councilmember McQuaid. Councilmember Gary. Oh, you are muted, Councilmember Gary.
Thank you so much, Mayor Jordan. I would agree with your approach. I think we just shouldn't be throwing money at a problem because it's a problem. I think we need to take a more proactive way of doing it, get as much information as we can. Again, this is some issues that have been concerned to the community. Listening to the voices of the community is important. Although, as Councilmember McQuaid said, yes, we do play a role in making the decision, but it's the community that wants to see more from us, and we should be able to provide that. So if Adam is able to present more information to relieve the fears and the uncertainties that myself and the community has, I think that we should go with that, come back, bring it, and then we'll make that decision at that time.
Thank you, Councilmember Gary. Vice Mayor Tiedemann.
Yeah, just to echo, I think if we can make everyone more comfortable with going through this process, then I think that's for the best, even if it results in a hopefully short delay, especially if Adam and his team are willing to provide more information, even if it's restating something that we mostly already have, putting it together and having it more explicitly, I think could be of help. I think the other point that I think is well taken is that a lot of how this is ultimately going to be used and how effective it is going to be at what we want it to be doing and what the SCJC wanted when they first proposed this is going to be dependent on both us, of whoever's on the subcommittee to supervise this, and the SCJC's subcommittee. So I think once we have hopefully assuaged any doubts about this and started the process, it's going to be a lot on us and the representatives on the SCJC to make sure that this goes as we want it to. And I think that's where we'll have a place for more of our energy for dealing with this.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Tiedemann. Councilmember Nason. Am I calling you out, or would you like to say?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
That's like a consensus is developing here. I have some reservations given we went through, these are kind of formal contracting processes. We went through the process. We have at least one qualified firm, probably, we may have more. I share, I understand the concern that that people have around this, but I would lean towards respecting the process and trying to influence it going forward. But I'm also comfortable with doing as Mayor Jordan suggests, to make sure that that we have buy-in here, that the Social and Economic Justice Commission can be comfortable with our decision, and I'm okay with going with what appears to be a majority trend here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nason. And a question for the city attorney from the RFPs that I've read, and I can't say as I've read this one. Usually there's a clause that reserves the right not to issue a contract in response to the RFP. Obviously not to anybody, to move on. I don't know if this RFP had that clause or not, or if we are actually in a position where we do need to legally let a contract to some firm.
Mayor Jordan, I can't speak to what this RFP specifically said, but we wouldn't be required to let a contract out in general. There could be numerous reasons, right? There could be financial reasons. Maybe for some reason we don't have the resources to let the contract out. The only caveat is obviously we can't have the prohibitions that I had mentioned earlier. But if there's a desire to not let it out, or maybe adjust the scope or adjust other things, that's a potential for the city.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Mayor, it is expressed directly in our RFP template.
Okay, that might have been where I read it at some point, rattling around in my brain. Thank you very much. In terms of I'm going to call it an ad hoc committee, not a subcommittee, because those are, I want to try to keep the city attorney happy, stay on terms here. So as far as the ad hoc council committee, you know, I see the firm as the partner and the professionals. And so their body of experience in terms of how one structures the questions and what kind of questions have been used before can help to spark conversation, imagination about what can be done. So I do think it is important that the firm have real solid experience to bring to the table in that regard, because they are the experts, which is not to say this firm doesn't have that. But I'm always a little cautious, and maybe you'll getting this theme from me, you know, there's the experts and the professionals. And so I like to recognize we have that in our society and give that due deference. So with that, I don't know if there is anybody has a motion in mind. And maybe it's just a sense of the council. Obviously, this is my first meeting, so I'm trying to figure out what to do here. I mean, it could be a sense. Yes, go ahead, please.
I think you're our fearless leader here, Mayor. You kind of put the direction on the table. I would suggest you
sure
motion for us if you're willing.
Yeah, so I don't know, to city manager, I don't know if it needs a motion or if it's just a sense of the council to ask the firm, should it be willing to bring back sort of a more structured document with examples on its DEI work specifically.
Sure. The fact that the council isn't taking action is basically the action for the record. The direction given to staff is to coordinate with the consultant should the consultant wish to provide additional detail to what they've already provided. If so, staff will return with that information.
Okay. I think unless there's any other comment, I think we've reached a conclusion on item 10-1. I can't help myself, Mr. Dr. Probalski, thank you for taking the time to be here and to submit a proposal. And we certainly hope that you will put together the materials that will help us to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That brings us to item 11-1, which is a proposed update to City Council procedures. This is an item brought to Council by Councilmember McQuaid. Councilmember McQuaid, would you like to present your proposal, or does the written material we've received suffice?
Sorry, Mayor, what did you say? Would you like me to present it? Or
I'm asking if you would like to present your proposal orally, or let the written material stand on its own. So I'm not putting you on the spot. You can say it's all there in writing. We proceed. But if you do have comments you'd like to make, now would be the time.
Okay. I do think it can stand alone as what is presented in writing. I will say it is simply a clarification to our existing procedures and policies. It does reflect our city manager council form of government, and then clarifying council makes policy and refers to the city manager for implementation. I think it ensures that council gets a full picture of items that are being proposed and things that we may not think about, but it gives us just a little broader understanding of what we're actually discussing at the time. So I don't really have anything else to add unless there's questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Councilmember or Vice Mayor? Councilmember Gary.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilmember McQuaid, for bringing this to our attention. And absolutely, it just adds a reminder to us as council members, mayor and vice mayor, on the process. But in order for this to fully be taken advantage of, there has to be full disclosure of information. when council members are asking and trying to bring something on behalf of the community to help the community, there has to be full disclosure. So the council member, mayor or vice mayor, knows exactly what they need to know in order to present something to the council. And then that way, that gives the council everything they need to make an informative decision. Thank you, Mayor Jordan.
Thank you, Councilmember Gary. Councilmember Nason, Vice Mayor Tiedemann. I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts. Okay. Question answered. I don't have any questions. I don't know if any of the attendees would like to make a comment at this time. This would be the time for comment by any of our 6 attendees that I see. I don't see any hands raised at this time. So we will proceed, bring it back to council. Oh, I see a hand raised. City Clerk, if you could admit, thank you very much.
Good evening once again, Mayor and council members. I believe that this is a good thing to bring to the council members' attention. However, I would hope that you would note that the city manager is responsible for providing exclusive reporting, in-depth reporting on any issue that the council member would bring to the table so that all of you can make an informative decision. While the nature of what you do as council members and advocates of the community, you all have jobs. Well, some of you, not all of you. But when you have a job and you bring an issue, you can provide as much data as relevant, but the time spent working an 8-hour shift job, plus this, plus that, plus doing research, that is not necessarily a great input. It probably would lack something, but you have a paid staff to provide the information required to help you or to assist you to make those quality decisions, because they are paid to notate, anticipate, and also project what is it needed so that you can move forward in advancing the city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Bringing it back to council. Thank you for bringing this item forward, Councilmember McQuaid. There is one part of it that catches my eye, which is the, well, I guess it's when possible, the recommendation should include options. It's not directive, so that's probably okay. I guess I'm thinking back to my advisory body days that the request was to give pros and cons and options to the council. And in practice, I think that probably doesn't often happen. Which is not a criticism that it necessarily needs to happen on as many items as we think it might need to happen on. More often than not, maybe the choice is more obvious than that. But I'm looking at that line again and seeing it's not prescriptive, it's suggestive. So that's probably okay. So with that, if anybody would like to make a motion on this item. Oh, I think I see some more discussion. Sorry, Councilmember Gary, I apologize.
So I would like to see some type of suggested language as far as timelines. I mean, when specific requests or additional information is added, what is the time frame? Also, suggestions as far as the city manager just sending an email out to us and say, anything that you want to bring up outside of what we state here in the meeting, you have to have it to me by Wednesday or whatever the case may be. But I think the going back and pulling, trying to get information, if timelines and things are set in place for us, right, to make sure that we're in compliance with what is being brought forward, I think that would help as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Gary. On timelines, I'm a little concerned because it depends on how many referrals for information staff gets. And so to the extent that the council has agreed on a strategic plan, that's where I tend to want staff to be focusing its time. So I'm not saying it would necessarily become a problem in this city, but I know other cities where the council has a backlog of 200 referrals to staff on various things to research. Vice Mayor Tiedemann, please.
I was just going to ask Nicole, what's the internal city staff deadline for when items have to get to you and to be put on the agenda? And not saying just when to be put on, but when do they have to get to you for you to have time to look at them? Because I assume there is an internal deadline.
Sure. It's also expressed in the council policies. It's the Friday before the Wednesday posting of the agenda.
Mea culpa.
And I just, if I can add to that, I think that if I'm understanding the policy language as proposed, this is well in advance of something being submitted specific for one particular agenda. It's, hey, this is an initiative or a proposal that I'm inclined to introduce. Can you review it, provide some analysis, and engage across the potentially affected departments to provide any additional information that may not be readily apparent? So then that council member then has the opportunity to receive that information and incorporate it into their overall proposal. It also gives staff, through the city manager, the opportunity to speak directly to agenda items as they continue to move forward, if there's operational concerns or issues or circumstances that may need to be reviewed and analyzed and reprioritized.
Thank you. So with that said, it seems like and going by the language here as well of the second sentence of the first paragraph of the suggested language, that the idea here is to make sure that there's time given for any of this information to be constructed and given back by staff, as well as that this should not be necessarily delineating our, drop dead date for getting things in the agenda, but is generally a more trying to give us a framework for how to best do things to make sure that we have all the information we need. And I see the author nodding, so that seems like the intent.
Any other comments?
Are we ready for a motion?
Councilmember Gary?
One other thing. So just for example, let me bring clarification to what I was stating as timeline. Just let Vice Mayor Tiedemann ask what was the time frame that staff needed to bring as far as time frame for us in requesting information. Are there any internal turnaround time frames for the city manager staff to get it back to us? What does that look like? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I could guess, but city manager, if you're willing to.
Sure. It really, honestly, wholeheartedly depends on the nature of the question or the initiative or the proposal and the weight thereof. If it's across multiple departments, it will take longer. It depends on the capacity of our staff at any given time. If it requires legal analysis, even limited legal analysis for the initial proposal, that certainly takes time through our city attorney's office. There's other issues that may come to the horizon that hadn't been considered before. It may, depending on, again, on the nature of it, involve different unions, meet and confer. It really depends. And I wouldn't be able to give any specifics unless I had the particular circumstances of a question or initiative or proposal.
Vice Mayor Tiedemann.
Thanks for that, Nicole. I would just remembering that we had discussed sort of this issue way back when, I think in our strategic plan, talking about staff and replying to council queries. And our conclusion then had been that generally it's the goal to do it within a day or so, but we can't really put a firm thing on that because sometimes it's just not possible. But I can just say from my experience, Nicole is very responsive to our queries and does a lot of work to make sure that we are getting updated on them. So I think it's very understandable that this will vary based on the how much information, what sort of information we're requesting. I think part of this may be that we may have to be comfortable with, things not going on the very next agenda, or, planning things out a little bit farther, because we have to know that what demands are being made of everybody in the city, apart from whatever we want to do in the moment. And I think that's always something good to remember.
Thank you. Yeah, in a way, it's a situation that kind of reminds me of the limits of the Brown Act, where members can discuss to a certain extent, what items can be on the agenda, but not the items themselves. And the analogy I'm making is, for any single member to ask staff to do more than a certain amount of work is beyond a single member's purview. So we're sort of a chicken and the egg. You need enough information to be able to bring something to council, but you can only go so far. Where's that line? I remember this chicken and the egg. My son told me when he was about 8, well, Dad, you always taught me the egg came first with evolution. So I know my experience or practice, for instance, I brought forward some recommendations that staff did deliberate on. I didn't bring them forward, but maybe a good example is the existing building electrification. That got to a certain point with staff putting in a certain amount of energy, and at a certain point staff said, okay, we've done our part now. You need to take this to the council, and the council has to say whether we're going to keep going or not. And I was like, thank you very much for the feedback. You're right. Okay, I'll take it to the council. So my inclination is to approve the policy, see how it works, over the next 6 months or a year, kind of have that awareness. There is some limit to what staff will do or should be expected to do in response to any single council member. And when that limit is reached, the council member can bring forward the item for the council to make a decision on as a body, whether staff will continue with the item or not. So that's not a suggestion to change the languages that exist, just maybe a way of framing it. Councilmember Nason.
If you're ready for a motion, I would move the item.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Nason and a second by Councilmember McQuaid to adopt the proposed amendment to the council procedures. City Clerk, you please poll the council.
Councilmember Nason,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Tiedemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Gary,
Yes.
Mayor Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember McQuaid.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, City Clerk. And with that, we are moving on to item 12. This is an item, probably a short one tonight, for council subcommittee reports on appointed representation of Albany to regional and other bodies, and any other meetings or events that the council members think are noteworthy to report. Can't imagine anybody has a report, but here we are. Okay, very good. Do any of the council members have a future agenda item request at this time? So we're moving on to section 13. Nope. Are there announcements of city meetings and events? I mean, there's certainly lots of meetings coming up. I, being new to the position, don't know how to filter which ones get announced and which ones don't. I welcome any guidance in that regard. Councilman Gary.
If I may, I'm sorry, I breezed by this as you were moving. I would like to thank the Albany Fire Department for the toy giveaway. It was amazing. We had so many toys we went and delivered to the village and families outside of the village, and it was really received very well. And so I just want to thank them for collecting and giving those toys to our community. So thank you. Sorry about that, Mayor.
Oh, no apology. Thank you very much for bringing that forward. Unless there's any other announcements, then I think we're adjourned with a very short meeting. And so I will say, following my predecessor's practice, thank you, council members Nason, McQuaid, and Gary, Vice Mayor Tiedemann, City Manager, City Attorney, City Clerk, and also to be recognized, KALB. Thank you very much for the work you do behind the scenes.
Get it, Mayor. That's right. Have a good wish.
Goodbye, all.